Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Connery Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up now about the release of defensive tackle Jon Allen. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. In a couple minutes, I'll be joined by Ben Baby, who covers the Bengals for ESPN. I wanted to talk about Trey Hendrickson and all that's going on with him there, what Ben knows now, but also to give you a little bit of more info just on Trey Hendrickson, the player, the person, the guy in the locker room, etc. So because there's a chance that he will be here. Don't know how strong a chance, but there's a chance. So again, we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's start with a couple things too. Free agency essentially starts Monday. That's when the legal tampering period starts. But as you know, a lot of deals get agreed to by Monday. It starts at Monday at noon Eastern time. So a lot of deals are going to be agreed to shortly thereafter. That's essentially the start of free agency. Then the official start of free agency is Wednesday at 4 o'clock. That's when contracts can be assigned, or then that's when teams can make it official, et cetera. Now, of course, if a guy's been cut, like Jon Allen, he can go sign right now with anybody. So, that he doesn't have to wait. And then Washington, of course, still has a lot of guys out there. As I record this right now, they have re-signed Zane Gonzalez and, of course, Bobby Wagner. So, and I'll get to him in just a minute. So, anyways, let's start with Jon Allen because that's the big release. Now, this was not unexpected, and I think from the time he got hurt, we knew that there was a chance that this could go this way. They're going to save $16.3 million on the cap. That's a substantial savings that allows them to go out and do, you can absorb the Deebo Samuel contract, or you can go make another move too and do something with that as well. And you could also extend Terry McLaurin eventually and free up more cap space for 25 if you want to do that. But Allen was a solid player for this franchise for a number of years. Of course, was a first-round draft pick in 2017 and was a very good starter. And even now, even when he wasn't playing at an all-pro, Pro Bowl level, he can still be a solid defensive tackle for someone, certainly part of a rotation, which would help his game age. So he doesn't have to take on all these double teams a lot, et cetera. And I think become maybe just more of a three-tech pass rusher type. That's what he could do. But one of the reasons you could do this here is they feel pretty good about Johnny Newton. I talked about this in one of the other podcasts earlier this week, but they're making this move. They didn't want to extend Jon Allen, and they were okay letting him go because they know they have Johnny Newton. And then you also know that there's some other free agent defensive tackles that you could bring in here. They do have ties to Javon Hargrave from San Francisco, but it's also a good draft for defensive tackles. So if you wanted to get another guy in here, you can go do that at a much lower cost, put him next to Daron Payne. But again, I think a lot of this starts with Johnny Newton and that his play, I think they're excited about him. And, I think he can certainly be a strong part of a rotation for sure. And as a starter, but also a guy that you're going to rotate, I think you still would want to bring in another bigger body type in here, or at least a strong run defender in that interior. And, so I think, let's pay attention to what they do there. But for Jon Allen, again, I think one of the things I think you have to be before the season. I know there was a chance that they could have extended, or there was talk they could extend him, see how the season goes. I think once he got hurt like that, it certainly put, it was going to make it harder, I think. But I think they were impressed by how he came back. And then he played in the playoffs, wasn't making massive impact plays, but he did make some plays. And it wasn't like he was getting blown off the ball. I thought he was pretty solid, I would say. So, and I think that's where his level is at. I do think he's going to get a lot of interest from some contending teams. Why not? I think you can get him a lot cheaper than what Washington would have had to have paid him this year. And you can maybe get him for a couple of years, but go to a contender, see what happens, be part of a rotation, and have different expectations than that were placed on here. And it's funny because you get some of these guys that have been here for a while, like Allen, and then just when things are going good, now they're gone. And so it's funny because they put up with a lot of stuff for a lot of years. That's why when you see a guy like Sam Cosmi get hurt in the postseason, you feel bad for him because that this is something that these guys have been waiting for a while. But Allen, of course, the longest of that group, along with Tress Way, who was here longer. But Allen certainly spent a lot of time here where things were just not very good at all. And he was often, became a voice of one of the faces of the franchise. And, so I think, but this is where they're going to go. And again, I think the Johnny Newton thing was a big deal. So anyways, Jon Allen out, there's one thing. And Bobby Wagner, of course, is back. And we did talk to Bobby Wagner on Friday. And listen, I don't think it was either going to be here or nowhere. I would have been shocked if he had gone somewhere else. They really wanted him back. He was continuing to be in that building. He wanted to be here. He's taking classes at Howard, although I think he graduates this summer. So, but I think that this is where he wanted to be. He loves playing for Dan Quinn. He also likes Ken Norton Jr., his position coach. So it wasn't just about Dan Quinn, but I do know that he's happy to be reunited with Quinn because this is what he had to say about him during a conference call with us today.
The belief that he has in me, the belief that he has in what I have and what I have left. And it's just a blessing because I think, no matter where you're at in your career, whether you're a rookie or whether you're a veteran, having somebody that believes in you, that cares about you, that wants to see you succeed is always going to help in your growth, no matter what point you are in your career. So, being able to build this with him and collaborate once again, it's been really, really fun, and I'm so grateful that we were able to figure this out.
There you go. I think the other part for Wagner is he's beloved in that locker room. This is clearly his team, but I don't think he takes that lightly. I think he respects what his voice means. I would say that. I don't think he was walking around like he's some king. He never was like that. I think that's one thing that was impressive about him. Strong relationship with Jaden Daniels, of course, and Frankie Louvu. So a really good re-signing for Washington. Now there's some more moves they have to make. We'll get more in free agency, and there's, you keep hearing like at least one offensive line move, whether free agency or the draft. We know they have to continue to attack the defensive line for sure. Also need a cornerback. Got to go get another receiver, bring some of their guys back, but I would go try and get another young receiver, perhaps. I like Darius Slayton. We've got the speed, gives you something else on the outside, but we'll see where they go. So anyways, that's it for me, folks. Now, here's my conversation with, by the way, before I get to my conversation with Ben Baby, will Washington pursue Trey Hendrickson? I definitely think they would be interested. The question becomes the price, and Ben and I talked about that. We recorded this on Friday afternoon. It's hard to really get a full feel for what that price will be, depending who you talk to. Sometimes you hear second round pick, you hear third round pick, you hear third and change. So we'll just see where they go. Would you be okay trading one pick, maybe two? And I say two because I think a second might get it done. This is not the same as the Myles Garrett situation. He's not going to cost as much. You will have to give him a contract extension. That will be a lot, but this opens that couple-year window with the Jaden Daniels contract of being able to afford moves like that if you want to go that route. So, but would you be okay with a second-round pick or maybe a third and change, or maybe there's a swap in there somewhere? I don't know. But anyways, we'll get into more of that if the move actually happens, but I am curious your thoughts. Anyway, here's my conversation with ESPN's Ben Baby. All right, Ben, so had you on earlier this offseason talking about T. Higgins, and I remember texting you later like, hey, I forgot to ask about Trey Hendrickson. The guy that one of us thought he was going to be available, and now he is. So first of all, why now with the Bengals? Because he asked last year too. Why now?
Yeah, based on what I heard over the last couple of days, it sounds like it's been a very amicable decision that both sides have come to an agreement that it could be a win-win for Trey to get the long-term deal he's looking for. He just he's a new dad. I believe he's got a newborn son, trying to establish roots now long-term, and has been eyeing that long-term deal now for a few years. The Bengals have kind of given him these one-year deal increments. And now, especially when you look at the price point for these edge rushers. We saw Max Crosby going
Right.
and setting the record north of what Justin Jefferson got. I believe around 35 million. And the thing is these edge rushers, you can anticipate it's going to keep going up and up. If a team acquires Myles Garrett, that number is going to go even higher. Micah Parsons is going to go even higher. Where is Trey going to slot in that? I think that's the big question. And we see the league has put a premium on all these things. And when you look at what the Bengals need, they may need more than an edge rusher, even at Trey's caliber, as well as he played last year. It wasn't the difference. I mean, he's still the defensive coordinator was still fired despite Trey turning in the best year of his career. And I think you go out and look at it, there needs to be more around him, and especially for the cap and cash that's going to command when you look at the offensive side of the ball as well that the Bengals have with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, both commanding big contracts, and the Bengals are built around the pass more so than anything. I think when you look at it, it might be a win-win. Trey might get his long-term deal somewhere else, and the Bengals could get assets and cap space to be able to improve the roster and get more pieces than just having a dominant edge rusher, who they do admire and appreciate.
And I was going to ask you too, like, how do they, because he's going to turn 31, I think, in December. How did you get a sense from them how they feel like his game might age? Because you get this next big contract, you're paying him until he's 33, 34 years old.
Yeah, and that's a big risk. And when you look at the Bengals, they've been very hesitant to extend guys who are over 30 years old. The last time they did that, Carlos Dunlap and Geno Atkins, they got their extensions in 18. Those did not age particularly well, but that was kind of offset because the Bengals, were kind of in a rebuilding mode at that point, had a rookie quarterback contract. Now you don't have that luxury. Now, having watched Trey and talking to guys inside the building and those around him, I think that age is going to play a unique factor here. Number one, he didn't get as many reps as he did in Cincinnati, when he was with the New Orleans Saints early in his career. So those early years, he doesn't have as high of a snap count as he had now. And the other thing to keep in mind is that I don't know if anybody in that building works harder than Trey Hendrickson does. I think he's a guy that the coaching staff has always pointed out. He's always in there in the weight room, always getting treatment, always training, always working on his conditioning, his body. I think I asked him last year essentially what he does outside of football, and he basically said, I don't really do a whole lot. I just sit here and work out. And he's very intentional. I think that when you're looking at paying a guy that kind of money for, even if it's a 2 or 3 year deal, whatever it may be, but in that price range, I think you can feel good knowing about the type of player you're getting. He's going to be committed, going all in. I think the one question is going to be, can he be a little bit better against the run? Right. But they just need him to go and get after the quarterback. That's the number one thing. You can fit around, enough run stoppers, but Trey, a high motor guy, going to get you a ton of sacks. The fact that he was able to get 17.5 last year on that defense speaks volumes. So I think that goes into the age conversation, is that you're getting somebody whose work ethic, it's going to be hard to beat whatever building he's going to be in.
And I was going to ask about the run stuff first, but sticking with, just the production, all that, as a pass rusher, where do you feel like because when he was in New Orleans, he had the one really good year, then he gets to Cincinnati, and the last couple of years was just took off. Where did he improve in that area?
Yeah, the Bengals, because I think a lot of people's eyebrows were raised when they gave Hendrickson that deal based off just 1 year of production. And it turns out that he's done a really good job of really finding ways to win. I think one of the things that people give him a lot of credit for is he's got a good pass rush set. I think that double swipe move, guys falling at it when they get in the locker room, he's kind of mastered that technique, and really going from speed to power is something that he does incredibly well. And he's able to give guys fits. I mean, I think there was a stretch in the middle of last season where each offensive tackle he played ended up getting benched the next week. He just kept getting guys cycled in and out. It was just collecting offensive tackles on that ledger. And so I think when you look at his game and what he really has done well, it's adding moves to his skill set. And when you look at edge rushers, I think one of the things that you have to understand is that, we've seen a lot of really talented players come in the league as good edge rushers. I think not to pick any names here, but Chase Young is the prime example of this as well. Washington fans know him well. And I think there's a lot of guys who are really physically gifted. But in turn, when you talk to offensive tackles in the league, the difference maker is, do guys continue to get better? Do they set up their moves? Do they have an attack strategy? And do they have the pieces around them to be put into positions to go out and attack the quarterback? think Trey answers all of those things in spades. And I think the preparation and the detail that he goes with how he goes about his business, talking to rookies, they admire how much he works at it. And he's been, especially if you have a lot of young players on defense, he's someone that you can say, hey, this is the way it needs to be done. And that's not worth an insignificant amount as well when you're paying him in contract value.
Sure, for sure. And it's funny because I did talk to somebody who faced him in New Orleans, and it was like, it was just before he was taken off. It's like he wasn't the greatest athlete, but you could see he was a student of it. And not to be stereotypical or anything, but that's when you watch him, he's got a plan when he rushes and all that. Against the run, what's been maybe the holdup from him being more consistent in that area, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question to ask. I'd have to really go back and look at why it hasn't been there. Sometimes it could just be as simple as getting really upfield, and that's kind of what he's designed to do. When you have a guy like Trey Hendrickson, you want to go out and have him get after the quarterback. That being said, the Bengals did use him in a lot of different ways. Lou Anarumo, when he was a defensive coordinator, dropped him into coverage at times, maybe asked him to spy a little bit and kind of trail off and maybe play a cloud at the line of scrimmage. And so you've seen that over, that versatility. And Trey was willing to do that. And I think that says a lot too, because a lot of guys might say, you know what, I really don't want to sit there and drop into coverage. I'm one of the best edge rushers in the league. He was willing to do that in certain situations, what best benefited the defense. He's a guy that I think that run, it's funny. I think there was a conversation I overheard in the locker room this year where there was talk about his run game. And one of the guys on that defense said, we don't need you to go stop the run. We just need you to get off the quarterback. That's fine. Don't worry about run stopping. Like, that'll come and go. Just go do what you do best. Like, you're here to go out and get after the quarterback. And when you look at his numbers, I've in our ESPN metrics, we've got a way to account for not just sacks, but sacks created, incompletions created, interceptions created. I would say I couldn't find a good name for that, so I like to call it the havoc rate or the havoc number or impact rushes. Trey might be number one in the league in that category. So he's always affecting the quarterback. And I think more importantly, John, as you know, our QBR rating system goes from a 0 to 100 scale. And we have a way to measure whenever a player gets the first pressure, what the opposing quarterback QBR is when that player gets a first pressure. Trey Hendrickson, when he gets that first pressure, it's in the single digits. So he is really affecting the quarterback when he gets that. And I think that's something that goes beyond that sack production. And you're willing to take maybe what he might not have in the run game when he's that prolific as an edge rusher.
That's a great stat too. I agree with that. So all this being said, what do you know now about how many teams possibly would be interested, and then what the cost might be?
Yeah, I've heard that over a dozen teams have shown interest. Now, that's not official offers, but there is a lot of interest. And, I think that you're going to have to go out and give, see what those packages are like. And Cincinnati's in a really good spot now, because if there are all these teams wanting to get involved, could that drive up the compensation package for Hendrickson? I think the thing is you've got to keep in mind the Bengals, where they're going to be sitting at in draft slot, how far you will need to move up, what other needs might you have. There's a lot of retooling that needs to be done. And do the Bengals want to go out and secure a premium pick? Do they want maybe more mid-round picks? I think that's a conversation that'll continue to play out over these next couple of days as teams really try to get this figured out ahead of free agency. But, I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be interested in the services. Washington, I think is going to be interesting to watch, because when you look at the price tag for an edge rusher of that caliber, when you're going to give him a new deal, and a new deal has to be contingent on that trade. You're not going to trade for him and not have something already agreed upon. So Washington is in a great position because they have a rookie quarterback, not only of Jaden Daniels' caliber, but you're getting him at such a discount. You want to maximize that every possibility. I think the fact they went out and got Deebo Samuel is a really great move, given that price point and what we're talking about for receivers. And that allows you to maybe go out and make an extra spend on an edge rusher, knowing that you have a cost control, and not just what Deebo is, but you got Terry McLaurin done so early back when everybody wondered what is. That's a little expensive. Now that looks like a good deal. And so I think that Washington's going to have a lot of things going in its favor. And when you look at a team that competed as well as they did last year, they'd be a perfect fit for what Trey Hendrickson brings to the table. And I think would be a great addition on that defense.
Yeah, I've heard the perfect fit a couple times now. And I do listen, there's no doubt that they're going to have at least inquire in there how far they can go with it. We'll see. Because like you said, the compensation and all that. And it's funny, Ben, because I talked to someone who's like, oh, I think it's a first round pick. Someone else is like, well, maybe a third, but probably a second. But like, and would there be another player attached to that? So like, it just feels like I'm not sure that anybody's quite sure what it will take right now. He is going to turn 31. He is in the last year of his deal, but he's really good. So it's going to be interesting to watch where the compensation goes, for sure.
Yeah,
And
no, I completely agree.
yeah, and do you like, because they have, they're picking at the end of the first round. Like, have you heard, would a player need to be attached to something, or is it so fluid that it just kind of depends?
Yeah, I don't have anything concrete on what exactly that compensation for a trade package might look like. I think it could just depend and see what might happen. If I'm the Bengals, getting a player back would be nice, especially given what that contract looks like. So I think that financial component, there's a lot to be considered there, especially now that we're seeing some guys hit the market. Now with Jonathan Allen going on the market, what is he going to command in free agency? The Bengals need to figure out something at defensive tackle. Nick Bosa hitting the market. That's going to be very interesting. Or Joey Bosa, excuse me, a longtime friend of Joe Burrow, as you know, an Ohio State guy. So I think that's going to be really, they've been close friends. I believe they're in a group chat with Sam Hubbard, if I'm not mistaken. So, getting him maybe at a discounted rate. Can you maybe package some pieces around that? So the Bengals, when you look at what they need, it may be, I think they're going to they have the luxury of looking at all the best offers. And again, I think, knowing that it's been good business on both sides for trade to explore trade, I think makes us a lot easier knowing that, hey, let's see what we can get and maximize that package for an elite player.
So just two more things. One, when I talked to this offensive lineman, he said he's a big time trash talker. Have you seen that side of him? Is that what you've heard?
Yeah, we like to Trey's nickname here is Blackout Trey. Because that's the way he kind of operates on the field. He's definitely known for talking a lot, jawing a lot. He'll let you hear about it. You'll see clips all the time of him riling up opposing offensive tackles, getting in their head a little bit. That's something that he is definitely, when he's between the lines, definitely puts on that persona. Outside the field, he's going to talk to you a lot about his faith and what that means to him, which is definitely comes through in every interview. But on the field, he's been an absolute menace, been a guy who really is disruptive, and he earned that Blackout Trey moniker for a reason. I think guys know that, when he gets on that field, he's, anything's liable. And I think that's what that edge that he has to him, it's what's made him so good.
Last thing, what do you think happens with T. Higgins there? I know.
Yeah, I think now the urgency for that has to be at an all-time high, because fans, this Bengals fan base, very upset that they weren't able to get Trey, especially given how much Joe Burrow has talked about Trey being in that tier of players that he wants to bring back, and you can't keep letting great players out of the building. And I think now that you have that cap space opens up, you now have extra wiggle room to deal with in getting T. Higgins back into the fold. And like I said, ultimately, this team will win and lose based on how good the passing attack is. When you pay your quarterback that kind of money, and when the Bengals have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase on the field, they've been as good as anybody. I think they believe if they can just get mid-level defense play, that'll turn this team from a team that didn't make the playoffs to being a potential Super Bowl contender again. So the Bengals still want to get a deal done with Higgins. I thought it was interesting when they announced the franchise tag for him. They made the unusual step of saying that they're still continuing to work on a long-term deal, which they've never done in the last few times that they've issued a franchise tag. That messaging has not been involved with the announcement. So I think for how much he means to Burrow, how much he means to this offense in the future, they would like to get something done. But, T told me point blank, I'm not taking a hometown discount. I think he wants what's going to be fair and wants the security he's been looking for now 3 years.
Awesome stuff, Ben. Thank you very much. Always appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, John.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Ben for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back on, I know it might be Sunday, but definitely on Monday. I'll be doing a podcast Monday later in the day after we know what Washington has done as far as like some of the contracts they've agreed to, etc. There is a chance that Bram and I will be doing a live stream on Tuesday night, so pay attention to that as well. But I'll let you know on Monday whether or not that's going to be the case, or maybe even Tuesday. We'll see. because things are going to be so fluid next week. Anyways, that's it for me. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.